Thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to let you know what ReMend stands for, first of all. We are Renal Empowered Mentors for Education in Nephrology and Dialysis. And my name is Kiku Boyance. I'm the Executive Director for ReMend. We're a nonprofit organization designed to help people who are dealing with kidney disease. We're a group of volunteers who have been through chronic kidney disease, dialysis, and/or transplantation, and are focused on encouraging and empowering those people who are on their kidney journey. And you can learn more about ReMend by visiting our website at remend.org. Today, we're going to talk about fistula care. It's a very important and fascinating topic, dialysis fistulas. And to undergo dialysis, it's necessary to connect the patient to a filtering system through a tube inserted into the body, requiring regular access to the site. And access can be gained through a graft, a hemodialysis catheter, or an arteriovenous, which is AV, fistula. As a former dialysis patient, I realized how much dialysis can be scary, and that's why we created Kidney Conversation. So much of dialysis can be scary because it's unknown. So we want to help educate and empower people about it. So because the more you know about the process, perhaps it becomes a little less intimidating. So let's get started here. I'd like to introduce our expert panelists. I wanted to let them introduce themselves, but let me quickly do this. We have the wonderful Bridget Lubers, who is a patient advocate. Charmaine Griffith, she is a ReMend mentor. Cindy Polis, she's a nurse and care coordination management educator with Balboa United. And David Ordaz, financial counselor for Balboa United. And Dr. Terry Behrend, he's the chief medical officer for Balboa Nephrology. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay, everyone. Hi there. Hello. I think some of you you can turn on your cameras, kids. Yay. How's it going?
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here, everyone.
Good.
So I know I just introduced all of you, but I would like to kind of go around and just to show, I didn't have your faces on screen. So just say who you are and what you do. Sorry about that, Charmaine. Charmaine, tell us about you and
Hi.
you're involved with ReMend. How about that?
Yeah. So thanks so much, and I'm happy to be here and talk about fistula care. I'm also dialysis/transplant patient, and so you're right, fistula care is very important. I've been with ReMend since 2014, where I started as a volunteer and mentor, and now I help you with our mentor program and getting mentors and patients assigned together to help build that support and help patients, along their kidney journey.
Thank you.
Yeah,
how about
you're welcome.
David? How about you? Tell us about yourself.
Hi, my name is David Ordaz. I'm a patient financial counselor for Balboa Nephrology Medical, also a patient advocate. I educate all our patients, CKD, ESRD, and transplanted patients on their benefits, options, rights, responsibilities, make sure they know about different resources in the community. Yeah, I try to speak with as many patients as possible regarding anything insurance. That's what I do.
Awesome, thank you. And Bridget, how about you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Bridget. I am a dialysis patient, have been for on and off for about 20 years. I currently do hemodialysis. I got hooked up with ReMend last year. My social worker connected with me with Kiku, and I'm now stepping from a mentee to a mentor role. And I'm very excited to be here and talk about my fistula.
Thank you so much. We definitely appreciate it. How about Miss Cindy?
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for having me. So yes, I am helping patients navigate their kidney journey and helping them, inspiring them, supporting them, educating them, coaching them. And that can be for education modality, fistula care, preparing for a fistula, and then other health measures as well. But that's what I do, and I love it. And I think it's a great opportunity to really support our patients and educate them and help and teach them how to advocate for themselves as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Mhm.
And Dr. Barron, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being here, Dr. Barron. Tell us a little bit about
Thank you.
yourself.
Thank you for having me. My name is Terry Behrend. I'm a nephrologist. I'm also an interventional nephrologist, which means that I spend the majority, I guess, of my professional time caring for dialysis access. And so this is something that I'm happy to be here to discuss. It's very important to me, and I have a great interest in it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And I just wanted to share my screen really quick, just to kind of go over some basic things about fistulas, dialysis fistulas. So an AV fistula is how patients are connected to a dialysis machine. There are 3 types of vascular access: arteriovenous fistula, graft, and catheter. Proper fistula care is critical for hemodialysis access, and choosing the right dialysis access care makes a really big difference. So I just wanted to show that, because these are things that we're going to be discussing today. So just to give people a heads up. And Dr. Barron answered my first question, so that's great. The difference, what's the difference between a nephrologist and an interventional nephrologist?
Yeah, well, the difference is, so all nephrologists go through nephrology training, and then interventional nephrology is an add-on. So to get to be an interventional nephrologist, you first do the nephrology training, and then do additional training to learn to care for dialysis access. And what does that really mean? Well, I'm not a surgeon, so I don't do surgeries so some dialysis access requires surgery to be created, and I don't do that, but I do work on, we'll call it maintenance, to keep the fistula working well after it's created.
Okay. Well, can you explain the dialysis access surgery? I know that you aren't the surgeon, but what type of physician does perform this procedure, and just a little bit about how it's done?
Yeah, great question. So and it'll be interesting to hear everybody's all the patients, you as well, Kiku, who've had a surgeon operate on them, if they even knew the different types of surgeons that will do access creation. But it varies, and it's generally people that are otherwise associated with kidney patients. So in many communities, it is whoever is your kidney transplant surgeon. And the kidney transplant surgeon could be many times a general surgeon, so the same person who maybe takes your appendix out or your gallbladder out, or many times it's a urologist. So it seems a little weird who a urologist, who's somebody you think operating on your bladder, operating on your arm to give you the fistula, but it just kind of goes down that path, because although they started maybe as a urologist, they really kind of became a kidney surgeon. And the surgery itself, and again, I'll give the doctor's perspective, and then we can hear all of you who've had the surgery give your perspective. And I think that's what's really interesting about this conversation. But the surgery itself is quite simple as surgeries go. Generally, you'll get a small incision, maybe an inch long at your wrist or in your elbow area. And the basically what's happening is it's just creating a short circuit between the artery and the vein. So, and then that over time lets the vein get bigger and have more blood going through it. Because for the dialysis machine to clean your blood, we need a lot of blood going fast. Otherwise, you just need to be hooked up to it 24 hours a day. The surgery is generally outpatient. Like I said, a small incision, wake up, recovery for an hour or two, and go home. So it's a pretty simple from my end of it, but it's interesting to hear other people's perspective. The other interesting thing that's new in the past few years is that now some patients, not all, are eligible to have this, quote, surgery all done through an IV. And so there is no opening of the skin, and it's just all done from the inside. It's like the surgery being done from the inside of the veins.
Oh, okay. I'm going to ask you about that later. Don't take that up because I was reading about that. It's fascinating. I spoke to somebody that actually had that procedure done. So I'd love to chat about that a little bit later. But you're right. We'd love to hear from Bridget right now. Bridget, you've had your fistula for 20 years. And so I'd love if you'd be able to share your experience and tell us about your fistula.
Absolutely. When I was having kidney failure and they knew I was going to be starting dialysis within a few months, I went ahead and I had my procedure done, and it was done actually by a vascular surgeon. And it was exactly how the doctor explained. It was a small incision about this big right here. And then over the years, we used it and it grew bigger and bigger. I did have some issues over the years with what's called Steele syndrome, where pretty much I'm not getting enough blood flow all the way to my hand. It's like too much of it is getting short, like he said, it's like goes this way, and instead of having any additional go to my hand, it would just return back into my heart and just do this loop. So it grew really big, and I had issues with circulation. So I've actually had 2 revision surgeries over the years where they just kind of opened it up again and fixed that connection. And I had one where they actually opened it from my elbow almost all the way up to my shoulder to go in and like ligate the entire vein, because the vein had gotten so big. They just pretty much removed half of the vein and sewed it shut so it was tighter and closer.
Wow.
I've been very lucky. I got that done about 14 years ago, 2008 maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, and ever since then I haven't had any issues. That was like really the surgery that really helped me the most. I did not use it for a while because I did have a couple kidney transplants. Unfortunately, they didn't last too long, so I was back on dialysis pretty shortly after. But I also did peritoneal dialysis for about 9 years. So it was not necessary to use my fistula. I used a peritoneal catheter, which came out of my abdomen. But within the past, yeah, it's very common. Unfortunately, I got an infection, had to switch back to doing in-center hemodialysis, and I've been doing that now since 2015. And I'm still having good flow rates and circulation with my arm. And it's been working great, which I'm very, very lucky.
Yeah,
it's still working, and I can continue using this.
Do you mind if
I'm careful with it?
Can I ask you why you are still on dialysis? If you don't want to share, that's totally cool. But can you say what happened? Or your diagnosis?
So I was diagnosed with focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, FSGS for short, back in the year 2000. I was in high school at the time. They did all sorts of medications trying to hold off the progression of the disease. Each one would work for a little while, but the disease would end up continuing. So by 2003, I had my first kidney transplant. That was a living donor from my dad. Within about 8 months, the FSGS had destroyed that kidney. So I was back on dialysis again. Then in 2005, I had my second kidney transplant. This one was a cadaver. That one lasted for about 1.5 years until, I guess, about 2007-ish. 2006, I guess.
Mhm.
And I had to go, that's when I started peritoneal dialysis. And I did that till 2015. And then I went back on in-center hemodialysis.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And it's just, the FSGS is it's a rare disease. It's kind of tricky that they don't really know how you get it. They don't really know what it is, how to treat it. There's just a lot of unknowns with it. And I'm the small percentage that a transplant, unfortunately, does not provide.
Yeah.
Like a cure, it's never really a cure, but you know, prolonged treatment that would make it go into remission. Unfortunately, mine comes back each time.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know it's very personal, and I appreciate that very much. Now, Bridget mentioned, you know, peritoneal dialysis and the fistula in her arm for in-center. Dr. Barron, what's the difference between those two types of access locations?
Yeah, so the main difference, if we just categorize, if we said by location, generally your hemodialysis fistula will be in your arm, sometimes in your legs, but almost always in your arm. And the peritoneal dialysis is in your belly. And then taking a little step further, you can think about it as the hemodialysis access needs to have access to blood. So it doesn't, that's why it could be in your arm, could be in your legs. There's some other, you know, exotic places you could have a catheter, but ultimately it needs to get blood. The peritoneal dialysis is without blood. It's just going in between, kind of in between your actual stomach and the wall of your belly. And there's a space in there and you just put fluid in there. So for some people, that's kind of a big deal. They don't want to see blood. They don't want to have any needles. And that's one reason to go there. And, but that's kind of the main difference. Blood, no blood, belly, arms.
That was me, no blood. There's also another thing that we're going to discuss, another access, which is the graft. And that was something that Charmaine has had experience with. So I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing your experience, your graft experience, and kind of your kidney journey.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. So when I first got my graft put in, I didn't really know what was happening. You know, the doctor just told me to, okay, this is what you have to do. And then I just went and did it. I didn't really, you know, I didn't really have the education of knowing between the fistula and the graft and things like that. So, so I went and, yeah, I don't think you can see it, but it's like you can kind of see, it's like it looks like a big vein right there. It doesn't work anymore, but they left it in, and it's silicone. And so they didn't use my natural vein. So it goes from my wrist to my elbow. And so I have 2 scars there. And so I liked it because it looked kind of more natural, I guess you could say. It was just a little bit bigger vein. And so you had the swish sound, sort of, you know, when you put it up to your ear, and it would kind of swish like an ultrasound, which everybody thought was super cool. And the problem, though, is that what I learned over time is that they just don't last, you know, very long. And so it just, after time, my nephrologist, who was here in Michigan at the time, he put it in, I thought, really early, prior to me starting. I didn't start, my first treatment wasn't, oh my goodness, until 97. And so I had it in a couple of years, if not longer, before I actually started. And so, so by the time, you know, eventually it started clotting and it wasn't really working. And, you know, I would have to go and get the intravenous or the central cath, is it what it's called? Central cath, yeah, that goes into your heart. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about that right now or not.
Yeah,
but,
I had that too. I called it a port before.
Yeah, the port. Yeah.
And that's not really what it's supposed to be called.
I know. So I kind of, I don't know about you, but I kind of liked it in a way because, even though I know it's not long term, but it kind of gave me a break from the needles. You know, and it, even though you know, with showering and stuff like that, you really had to be super careful with it. But but yeah, I just kind of felt like I didn't really know. Again, I wasn't asking questions back then. You know, it was,
And how
you know,
long ago
25
was
years.
this? 25.
Yeah,
Okay.
25 years ago or so.
Mhm.
And so I wasn't really asking questions. I just, you know, was kind of annoyed that I even had to interrupt my day to do dialysis, you know.
Mhm.
So I just didn't really ask. And I don't know, I think that if I didn't ask, then maybe it wasn't real or something. I don't really know. But
And that's, you know, we both had similar experiences, and that's
yeah,
why ReMend is around, because there wasn't a whole
yep,
lot of information, and patients still today are very surprised when they learn that they have chronic kidney disease or end-stage renal disease. And so,
yep,
you know, that's why we're here, to help educate
right,
patients about it and share our experiences.
yeah.
But both of your stories bring up so many questions for all of you. I don't even know where to start. Let's see. God, Charmaine, you brought up so many things that I wanted to ask. Does anybody else have any questions too? Is it just me? Okay.
Been there.
So,
I have all the answers.
so Dr. Barron, is there a what would you say would be like the perfect patient for each type of dialysis? I mean, I'm not going to say Dr. Barron says, you know, this patient has to have, but in your mind, what would be the ideal candidate for a hemodialysis in center, for PD, and for the, you know, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, that's a great question, and it's also a hard question. But I would say generally you know, I have some, and I'll get to some of my own personal opinions about it, but I'm not the one that has to sit in the chair, right? I'm not the one doing it. I think that the most important part is to educate the patient and let them pick which one fits into their lifestyle the best. And with that said, what I often tell patients, it's like, you know, here I am, imagine you're in your, you know, Charmaine, there you are, I'm your doctor, annoying you, getting in your way of your day, you just want to go about your thing. And I try to tell you about this, and then you know, you have to pick, oh, do I want to do PD at home or go do hemodialysis in center? But, you know, I can tell you all that I want, and I will, and I'll try, but ultimately you're going to go and try it. And it's like ordering something new at a restaurant. You might not like it. And the one thing that I think is important for patients to know is, if you don't like it, we'll send it back and order something else. You can always change. You can always switch. I think that's important to know.
That's so great to add that in there, that the patients.
Now, with that said, I think that in general, there's a lot of advantages to doing dialysis at home. You know, just really from a personal standpoint, if it were me, I would do it at home, because I personally would rather be laying on my own couch watching Sports Center than sitting in a dialysis clinic with nurses wanting to check my blood pressure and this. But that's a personal choice for me. It also frees up your day. You know, when I tell patients, when you go in center, it's kind of pretty rigid on the schedule. It's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10:45 or whatever time is your time. And yes, you can change it, but it's not like you can just walk in and out of there whenever you want. Whereas if you're at home and you want to do your dialysis at 2 o'clock one day and 5 o'clock the next day, you can switch your schedule a lot more. And so if you're somebody who's active and changes your schedule and wants to stay active, that's another reason to do it at home. There's a medical reason to do not so much dialysis at home, but peritoneal dialysis when you're first starting dialysis. And that is, patients start dialysis when their kidney function gets down to less than 10%, maybe 5 to 10%. And you might think, oh, geez, I only have 5% kidney function. You know, that's just like having 0. But having that extra 5% is super important to your well-being. And people who go on peritoneal dialysis can maintain that 5% for years, whereas people that go on in-center hemodialysis lose that 5% within 6 to 12 months.
Wow.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I found personally, peritoneal was good for me at the time because I was going to college still, and then I was working. So I had that flexibility where I could go home and just hook up to my machine, and I would travel with it, and I did a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so it was really great for that, for me. And I luckily, like, I didn't have a big, my apartment was pretty small, but I did have space. That's part of, I feel like, one of the large hindrances to doing it at home. It's a lot of supplies.
Yeah, I would agree with that too.
The
And
Baxter
you have to have
boxes.
the room.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the delivery, you know, it was like a whole process. Like the boxes come and then, you know, put them away and organize them in the shelves and all that. It was a whole,
Yeah.
And it's
whole
also,
thing.
you know, it's like a big project. Like I used to have my friends come over, and that was like, they would get their workout. I'd be like, you guys want to work out? Like, can you carry all these boxes from my house into the room? And they were like carrying heavy boxes for me. I was like, because I can't do that. I have my fistula. I'm not supposed to carry heavy stuff. Like, so it's, you know, you gotta have to have
That's great.
that support system as well.
Right.
I had a delivery guy put it in my closet for me because I was on the first level. Put it in the side.
A lot of the time, if I was home, but that was kind of, sometimes they would just deliver whenever. They're like, we're coming this time. And I'm like, well, I'm at work or I'm at school. Like, I can't do that. So they would just deliver it to my front door. Luckily, I mean, I lived upstairs, so they would bring it up the staircase, but just like on the area right in front of my front door.
Wow.
So yeah. And then, it's also trickier. I had a house fire at one point when I was doing my peritoneal dialysis.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't even think about it. I literally just like grabbed my purse and was like, I'm out of there.
Yeah.
And then it was actually the fireman who saved my dialysis machine and brought it out for me, because he was like, oh, I used to be a paramedic. Like, I know that this is a dialysis machine, that you need this, and here's your meds. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. Like, about it. And so it's like, there's always a give and a take, you know, sometimes that it's hard when you have to deal with other things and you're doing treatment, taking care of yourself at home. Times like that, and you're like, I wish I could just like go somewhere and just someone would just do it for me and I don't have to worry about it.
Right. But, hey, Cindy, I wanted to ask you, do you have a lot of patients call in or chat with you about the different treatment options? And, you know, what do you tell them when they say, you know, I'm really up in the air. I don't know if I should do the manual PD or a cycler or in-center. What kind of advice do you give them?
So that's a good question. I try to engage my patients first and really get to know them and have that kind of relationship ahead of time before kind of, you know, giving my opinion on what I think would be best for them. You know, where do they live? Do they have the knowledge? Do they have the skills? So it's kind of an assessment really before I start kind of giving ideas on what I think would be good for them. And weighing out, you know, the benefits of PD also, you know, what is your lifestyle? Are you busy? Are you working? Are you taking care of a family? And, you know, or some people just want somebody to do it for them and connect them, and they don't have anything else they need to do for the day. And so maybe in-center is a good choice. But I would say majority of the people that I talk to after really presenting all the modality options, in terms of dialysis, I would say PD is by far the winner, because it just is a gradual exchange and it's an easier exchange on their body. It seems from the feedback I'm getting from my patients, and just the energy level and, you know, the flexibility and doing while they're sleeping. And, you know, there's a few patients that I've talked to in the past that'll call and say, I don't want to do this anymore. It's just, I don't want to do it at nighttime. And so, you know, we'll make a checklist of like, what's bothering you about PD, and then let's make a checklist of home in center or HHD. So let's make a checklist of, what sounds better for you in your life. And what is it that you don't like? And what is it that you like about, in center? And usually they're like, forget it, I'm going to stay with PD. So, I think you need to really have that education and empower them with making that decision and giving them all the good and the bad of every modality, to be honest with them so that they can make the best choice. And again, they can change later on. And it's not a one size fits all for these patients. So, and educating themselves, there's great material out there. There's great YouTube videos. So that's kind of how I start.
I think that that's a great thing to be able to, give people all their options. And I think one of the other things that people need to really be honest with themselves about is their diet.
Right.
If you are on PD, you have much more, you are doing dialysis every single day. So you have much more flexibility. It's not as restricted. Your fluids, there's still not a lot of fluids because you can't pull off too much, but it's not as restricted and way more gentle on your body. When you're doing in-center hemo, you are only getting what you would normally get 24 hours a day. You're getting that for 3.5 hours, 3 times a week. And that's it. So it's you have to be very careful watching your phosphorus and your potassium and your protein and your calcium. Don't drink too much water. Don't do this. Don't do that. It's on the one hand, it's easy because you just show up. You don't have to take care of it yourself. But on the other hand, the diet is much more restrictive and much more
we have a previous video about that on ReMend.org about diet in November, but we're also going to do another one with someone you introduced me to, Cindy, with Celeste. We're going to talk about plant-based diets and other things. So
perfect.
Everyone I speak to, I'm not kidding you, every patient that comes through ReMend asks about diet, so it's so important. And that's why I'm always posting stuff about food. Yes, I love food and I'm a huge foodie, whatever, but that's not why. You can still have delicious food. And you just feel like, yes, you're restricted, but you can still have a delicious life. So
I love that.
I do want to ask David a question, because we were kind of talking about all these different things, and you can change your mind. Like if you don't like one certain type of treatment, you can go back and try something else. I wanted to ask you 2 things, David. What is that like financially? How do people, what's the process, first of all, for the access procedure? And then what happens when you do want to switch over? Is that something that Medicare handles, and have you experienced that with patients?
Yeah, all the time. Patients always ask, again, and I always refer to their nephrologist but they ask, what if I want to start PD, or want to start with a fistula and want to change my mind eventually? So yes, you can definitely do that. The only problem is that a lot of times there's a copay involved. Sometimes it's cheap, sometimes it's manageable, and sometimes it's just really expensive.
Wait, what's cheap, manageable, and expensive?
And copay for in-center or copay for home dialysis?
Copay for the procedures, first for the access placement.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what's going to be kind of expensive.
Okay.
So if you have the right health plan, you may not have a copay or a co-insurance involved. But if you have if you have the wrong health plan and you have to get some kind of outpatient surgery, and that's what it is, a placement, access placement is a outpatient surgical procedure, just like Dr. Barron said earlier. And that will have a copay, usually anywhere between $0 up to, if you have Medicare Advantage, up to $325. Sometimes a 20% co-insurance. Again, all depends on the plan you wish to have. And it's an outpatient procedure, so most of the time you will need an authorization for services if you have a health plan like an HMO. But unless you have a Medicare, which doesn't require authorization for most services or referrals, you can get that with no problem. Again, you just have to be wary about that financial responsibility. It can be steep, or it can be quite manageable, or or at no cost sometimes.
David,
That's what you
David, can you talk about the issue if you have no insurance and if you go on PD versus if you go on hemo when you get Medicare?
Yes. All right. So Medicare, you get Medicare when you turn 65 and you worked at least 40 quarters or 10 years of your life, paid into the FICA system, you paid your taxes. If you've done that, you get Medicare when you turn 65, or if you have end-stage renal disease, and there's another disease, I believe it's Lou Gehrig's disease. If you get these diseases that impede you from working for over a year, then you worked the proper amount of time to get the 40 quarters, paid 10 years of your life into the FICA system, then you will you will be entitled to Medicare benefits if you're under 65. And so that's another thing you want to look at. And before you even start dialysis, most patients that I've talked to, I wouldn't say most, but 50% of the patients that I talk to that start dialysis, 50% are over 65, and I think about 50% are under 55 or 65, I'm sorry, which means that they probably also have some other type of insurance that's not Medicare. For example, they might have commercial insurance through their employer. They might have a state Medicaid program or Medi-Cal here in California. They might have military insurance through TRICARE or VA benefits, and they can get all these services through them. Also, the access placements. Dr. Barron, you mentioned, when you start your Medicare benefits, another way to start Medicare is, or I should say another way to start Medicare benefits is how you begin your treatments, your dialysis treatments. For example, if you start home hemodialysis or peritoneal dialysis, then your Medicare benefits, if entitled, in other words, if you meet those requirements I mentioned earlier, your Medicare benefits would begin on the first of the month that you begin your treatment. So for example, today is the 15th of the month. If you begin your treatments today, for example, then your Medicare would begin on the first of this month. It'll go retroactively to the first of this month. If you decide to go to in-center hemodialysis treatments, then your Medicare benefits, if entitled, will begin on the first of the fourth month after you begin your dialysis treatments. So that's what you want to look after. Again, you want to look after the insurance you have right now and the insurance that you might have post beginning your treatments.
So in-center is a 90-day wait.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Do until then.
Right.
Yeah, 90-day wait.
That's just crazy. I didn't
Again,
have
that's for
that
insight.
knowledge when I was diagnosed. Luckily, I'm going to give a shout out to Annette Oat, everyone. She educated me. In fact, we're still friends today. And this was over 20 years ago. Had she not been there, I don't know what I would have done, but she explained all of this. So she's like you, David, like has all that information about what a kidney patient needs.
She's fantastic.
Yeah, you guys,
Yeah,
you work together sometimes. So thank you for all of that. And
it's important to know this.
Yeah.
It's important to know this because you also want to find out how and when you can start disability benefits, or what kind of disability benefits you can get. Social Security disability insurance, state disability insurance, SSI. There's four different major types of disability benefits that you can collect once you go on dialysis. But yeah, it's always important to know information.
What's the best place for someone to get that information? And don't say just call you.
Right here.
His information actually is on,
me.
if you do want his information, I'm not even kidding. I work with Balboa as well, Balboa Nephrology, Balboa United, and his information is on balboacare.com, everyone. So go to our blog there and you can see a story about David, and we'll also post that somewhere. I feel weird about doing that, David. It's like all your information if people are calling you. But I know that Charmaine, I think you have a question for Dr. Barron.
I do. I was just curious if you could, kind of circling back to the PD catheter. I don't know what
Not
to call it.
port.
Is it a port? Is it a catheter? But anyway, the access for PD, how do you determine where it's placed? Because a lot of, mine was very, very low. So I could actually wear like a bikini, out on the beach, and you couldn't even see it. It was really low. But then other people, their access is really high, like up by their waistband. So is there anything that you guys look for that would help determine like where the placement would be at?
Well, that's a great question. I've never heard of one so low that you could tuck it into a bikini. You must have had a really special one. But to be honest, it is important. If you don't think about it ahead of time and get sort of the patient's input on, it might be important to have it on one side or another based on if you're left-handed or right-handed, how easy it is to access the thing, or just personal preference. But the other important thing that people don't realize is if the patient comes in and is laying down on the operating table, unless they're, have the perfect 21-year-old abdomen, things look different when you're sitting up and standing up. And sometimes what looks like a great spot when somebody's laying down ends up right at your belt line. So you can never put your pair of pants on again right where you want to put them, or it rubs on the catheter.
Okay.
So ideally, we kind of have the person sitting up and mark it before we go into the operating room.
Okay.
Mine was low enough that it was always under my pant line, and I could wear, two-piece bathing suits, and have it mostly covered. I would wear like a belt that secured it underneath to do all that. But
they're bold.
Like no one had.
Yeah,
I actually bought the I didn't like the belt at all. So what I did is I bought the skin tone band-aids, like the big square ones. And I coiled it right on up, and then coiled it once around.
Yeah.
And then laid it flat, and then put the skin tone. Man, it was creative stuff.
Yeah. You end up becoming creative in how to hide that stuff and do your actual treatment. I'm not even going to go into all that.
Right.
But, you find out ways.
Right.
I was very lucky. I found a company in Canada called Stickman Industries. They have the best belts, because I had tried those other ones. Everyone was like all fat and they were just bulky and uncomfortable. These ones were like this big. You just would kind of slide it in and turn it over, so it's just in one U shape, and it secures it to the front, and it has these D rings, and you
God,
secure it around to the back, and then you just tuck it into your clothes. It was amazing. I introduced that to so many different patients.
I'm gonna look that up.
Stick
right.
Band or man? Okay.
Stickman.
Stickman. Okay.
Stickman. Yeah, that's a clever name.
Yes. I have a question for you guys. How do you said a lot about trying to hide it, and Bridget, right now on the one hand we're talking about hiding it, and then you're showing off your fistula, but I would imagine what happens when you go to the beach and somebody notices and says, first of all, what experiences are people like, ooh, what is that? Or are they curious, oh, what is that? And how, what have been your experiences there, and how have you handled it?
For me personally, I've always been very open about all of it. And so, if someone asks me, what is that, blah, 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 I would just tell them, you can explain it to him, but they really have no idea. You're like, it's my dialysis access. What's dialysis? And then it opens Pandora's box, and you have to tell them every detail, and you're like starting a lesson at that moment. You're like, okay, I'm gonna get my teacher hat on. I'm gonna teach everyone about dialysis. But I don't know. I know a lot of people are more, private, shy. They don't want to talk about that stuff. So for me, it hasn't been that bad, but it's also, I don't know, I feel like I mentally had to get there. So I didn't feel crappy each time somebody asked about it. Because people ask about my fistula all the time. What's wrong with your arm? what's wrong with your face? I don't know.
Yeah, and I
Like,
think it's a little bit I think it's a little different between a catheter, like a tube coming out of your stomach,
Yeah.
than like my graft or a fistula. I think it's different. And so I didn't necessarily try to hide it, I guess, but it just kind of worked its way in, you know, like it just like I didn't care if anybody saw it, but it's just like, I don't know, it's like I didn't want to be on the beach and like, oh, like, hey, Captain Winky's out or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
It's like I just didn't want that to happen. But you know, but yeah, I'm the same as you, Bridget. Like I would just openly talk about it if somebody asked, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard because it's like you want to hide it. You just because you don't want to answer questions all the time.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I think
Well, plus
that's
you're trying to be cute half the time, you know, when you want to wear a bikini
Right.
or something, right?
Exactly,
And
you
so,
know,
you
like,
know,
my
that's why
vanity
I
went
get
out
it.
the window when I was 18 and I was diagnosed and the doctor put me on prednisone. He's like, the side effects are you're gonna get acne and you're gonna get fat. And I was like, why would you tell a 17-year-old that?
Yeah, that's right.
Horrible. Like
Right.
the two worst possible things at that moment of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And then it just, you know, vanity went out the window and it's like survival mode for 20 years instead. So just sometimes though, you want to just live your life and you just want to enjoy your day at the beach. You don't want to talk about it. You don't want to think about it. You want to like, because you can never take a vacation from your body and from dialysis.
Yep.
So sometimes it's nice. You like, I just would love a few hours to just be Bridget, and I'm not Bridget with kidney disease.
Right.
Bridget.
Right.
100%.
You know, I had one
Yeah,
crazy
100%.
experience about the port, or not the port, the catheter. I used to wear tank tops and whatnot. And one time somebody asked me if I was shot, and I thought that was just hilarious. So I said, yeah, I got shot there. And I have 2 scars now because I had a different, I did have a port.
I do too.
But yeah, it's sometimes you just have to have fun with it. It depends on my mood, and it depends on how people ask you, you know, like,
right. That's what I was going to say.
none of your damn business, or, you know,
people are really polite about it, but some people will, what's wrong with your arm? What is that? Like, what's going on?
Well, like, did you get shot?
Yeah,
I did.
I want to tell you.
Watch out.
Yeah, you better look out.
I have like a big scar on my shoulder from a skin cancer, and someone once asked me if I got like attacked by a shark. And I was like, yes, I did. As a matter of fact, I did. Isn't that crazy? You just gotta like lean into it, and mess with them. So.
Totally.
You kind of have to make people
like started Dr. Barron
asking the appropriate question.
You started it, but I do have another question for you, Dr. Barron. So you brought it up earlier about new developments, a new approach to dialysis fistulas, and I had mentioned that I spoke with someone recently who had this procedure, and I would love for you to share more about it. I think it's called Wavelink. So could you just explain a little bit about it? And I have a couple of questions.
Yeah, well, so there's 2 companies that do these. We call it endovascular fistula, but inside the vasculature, inside the vein, endovascular, and the 2 different technologies are. I'll start with the other one. The other one is made by a company called Avenue, which was then sold to Medtronic. But theirs is completely ultrasound guided. So you just have an ultrasound on your arm to find where the artery and the vein come really close together, and it has to be a certain place, and not everybody has it. But if they do have it, then you just go from the inside of the vein. So just imagine if you went to the hospital and somebody put an IV in, you were in the hospital for whatever, and then they just keep going with that IV until it goes out the other side of the vein and then into the artery. And then it's almost like a little welding procedure on the inside that kind of melts them together, let's say. So that's the other one, not the one that you're talking about. And then the Wavelink, that one's pretty neat too. What you do is you put 2 catheters in at the same time. So almost like two IVs, but one is in the vein and one is in the artery. And then you kind of steer them down to where the artery and the vein are right next to each other. So you got one catheter here, one catheter here. And then they have magnets on them. So you turn the magnets on and then they stick together.
Wow.
And then once they're stuck together, you give a little pulse of electricity and it burns a little hole between them where they were stuck together. And you would think, honestly, if somebody told me they were going to do that or going to start a company that did that, I would say, well, that just sounds like a horrible idea. You're going to pull those catheters out and it's going to bleed everywhere, but it doesn't. It works.
Oh,
Wow. What's the advantage of that for a patient?
So a couple of advantages. One, one of the problems, Charmaine mentioned, I think it was Charmaine that mentioned she got her access put in 2 years before she needed it. And there's a couple reasons that happens. One, it's hard to predict when a person will start dialysis. But two, even when we can predict it, there's a lot of hurdles you got to get through from the day that your doctor tells you you need a fistula to getting a fistula. You can't just walk across the street and have a fistula. You got to make an appointment with your surgeon and you got to get a prior auth from your insurance company. And then one of those falls through and then you get the appointment with the surgeon for the consult and he had an emergency surgery that day and your appointment got canceled. And what seems like it should be a very simple process can take months. It can go very smoothly, but a lot of bumps can get in the way. So one advantage of this is you just schedule to have the procedure and it's all done in one day and you get it done and you're done. And you don't have surgery. You just have a Band-Aid on your, either right here in the middle of your arm or down at your wrist when you leave. The other advantage is the point that Bridget made. Some people's fistulas get humongous, and that can cause a lot of different problems. One is just cosmetic, but another is the problem she had. It was just taking blood from where it should be going naturally. And the thought is on these fistulas is they will never get that huge. It doesn't seem like that so far, and they've been around for a few years now. And also because Bridget doesn't seem to have this on her fistula now. I don't know if you did before the surgery with the big long scar, but all of you have certainly seen people in the dialysis clinics who, if you put the needles in the same two spots over and over, you get two big focal lumps.
Yep.
And that doesn't seem to happen with these either. And we think it's, or at least not nearly as much. And we think it's because the flow is much less and it's under less pressure.
Very cool.
That's nice.
It's fascinating. So could somebody that has this, I don't know what you call it, standard AV fistula, could somebody say, hey, I want to try that, so I don't want this one anymore?
Yeah, well, there would be no sense in that as long as their current fistula is working. But if they were ever having, Bridget's got her fistula on her right arm there, if someday, and it never will, if it's lasted this long, once you get a fistula that'll last that long, it'll last forever. But if something ever happened and she was going to need a new one in her other arm, well, then yes, she could potentially do that.
Cool.
That's
Good to
very
know.
cool.
Good to know. Okay, well, we're nearing our hour, I think. Gosh, we've had a great conversation about dialysis fistulas, but before we close out today's episode, is there anything that anyone would like to add? Let me see, how about, what would you like patients to know, whether it's about your experience or, Dr. Barron, what are some of the things, you talk to patients all the time, you see them all the time. God, I really wish that they knew this. Talk amongst yourselves. Who would like to go first? Charmaine. Cindy?
I think, what?
Nothing, go ahead.
I'll keep it short. I just think from my experience, I'm just a huge proponent of patients advocating for themselves And how they do that is by asking questions. And a lot of patients won't ask questions because, and I was one of those patients, because I don't know, I don't know what question I should ask. And so it's okay to even say that, like, you know, talk to your nephrologist and say, okay, well, I'm really uncertain about some things, but I just don't know what it is. So can we maybe talk a little bit more about it? Because it's just, you know, I mean, my experience was fine. My experience was great as treatment goes, but I just wish that I had been more educated, just a more educated patient by asking more questions. And I just say, if you don't understand, ask questions, and if you still don't understand, keep asking. So that would be my takeaway.
Love it. Cindy, how about you?
Yeah, I was going to just say something very similar on the education part, of course. And I think for a lot of patients that I speak to, you know, it's fear, you know, that big image, that fearful image of a fistula. Oh my gosh, needles. Oh my gosh, blood. Oh my gosh, you know, and they already have this mindset of what it's going to look like. And I think if you can help guide them through what those expectations are going to be and take them step by step by step by step, and then asking them if they have some clarity, and then asking them more questions later, like, what is that fear? Oh my gosh, I have to have surgery. Oh my gosh, am I going to wake up? Oh my gosh, is it general anesthesia? And just really break it down and minimize the fears, and not minimizing the experience, but minimizing the fear, and really presenting the inside perspective that I get from talking to other patients, and to give that to them so they have those expectations, so they know going into the procedure of, you know, okay, these are the steps that she taught me that we're going to have. So I think really defining those expectations up front eliminates that fear factor in the beginning.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
How about David?
Okay, just like always, there's a ton of resources out there. You know, I'm one of them. Feel free to give me a call if you have any questions. Another thing that I wanted to mention is not too long ago, I got to visit one of the peritoneal dialysis clinics that are there. And the staff there is fantastic. And they usually, if you decide to go peritoneal dialysis, the nurses, the staff there will make sure that you're ready to do peritoneal dialysis. I run into a lot of patients who are afraid, oh, that means I have to do it myself. I was like, yeah, you do it yourself, and you know, you might have somebody there that might be able to help you out. But yeah, you have to learn how to do this yourself. But again, the staff are very, very well trained to teach you exactly what you need to do, so you don't have any doubts as to what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Right on.
I'd like to piggyback onto that and say that with my experience with the peritoneal dialysis, they train, and you may have a goal for, like, at this point, by the end of the month, we'll send you and you'll do it on your own at home. And if you're not ready, they're going to keep training you, you know, you're not going to get like cut off of your training. So don't worry about that. Like, I would say that's true, that these, you know, the nurses, the technicians, all the folks are really great, and they know, you know, what it's going to take for you to be successful. And that's what they want, is for you to have success doing this on your own.
Yep, exactly. Dr. Barron.
Yeah, well, I fully support and agree with patients being educated and asking all the questions that you can. An interesting point for everyone out there is about how important your fistula or whatever your dialysis access is about how important it is that it's the dialysis access itself that made chronic dialysis possible. No patient could get chronic dialysis until they figured out how to get chronic access. And the first patient that got chronic dialysis was named Clyde Shields in Seattle, Washington. And he had a type of access that we don't use anymore called a Scribner shunt. It was sort of like a fistula outside of your body, but But the point I'm making is you go to the clinic or you get your PD cycler that the fireman carries out and you think, oh, all that technology there must be what's making all of this possible, but it's really your access that's making dialysis possible. And that's why it's important for you to ask questions about it, know how to take care of it, and just learn as much as you can about it.
I'd say the person who invented PD, like, who thought I'm going to put some of this magic fluid in this like random cavity you have in your abdomen, and that's going to clean your blood and you can live that way if your kidneys don't work. Like, that one really blows my mind, because it really is just like magic fluid in this random part of your body that people don't even realize that there's like this space that has this capacity to do that. You try to explain, like, there's a membrane and it like sucks the stuff in and it does this. And like, I don't know, I just do it.
Yeah, yeah. It's really cool.
Yep, it is fascinating.
Really fascinating. Yep.
So I just wanted to say, you know,
no matter which ones they are.
Something that we all have in common is that we're all here to help people like you know, people with chronic kidney disease, dialysis patients and their caregivers and their loved ones. That's what ReMend is here for. So, you know, kidney disease is an incredibly difficult situation to deal with, and our panelists have experienced kidney disease firsthand, or they work closely with people going through it. So we hope this information encourages you to focus on your self-care and take good care of your overall health. Just by signing up for this broadcast means you've taken steps in managing your kidney care. And if you or someone you know dealing with kidney disease would like to speak to someone who's been on their own kidney journey, please reach out to ReMend. Our website address is remend.org. Reach out on our contact page and see how you can be involved. You can donate, or you can even become a mentor, or check out our previous broadcasts. It's remend.org. And all of us at ReMend and our wonderful partners and friends here want you to know that you're not alone. A lot of people feel like, you know, they're going through this struggle on their own, and they're not. So that's why we're here. And I just want to share my screen one last time. And thank everyone for being here. Thank you so much, panelists. I appreciate you. If you need to, please contact us at remend.org. We've got a YouTube channel now, and we're on Instagram and Facebook. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Have a great night, and we'll see you at the end of the month. We're going to be talking about body issues, body image, intimacy, things like that. Check our website for that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.